Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to cover analysis for the new moon or Amavasya that's coming up today, May 7th, 2024. And this is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so keep that in mind. But it seemed like the overall theme for this moment in time was seeking voice and justice. So let's get into it. Oh, a note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. And then you might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. So if you're new to Vedic astrology, also known as Jyotish or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. And wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. All of my videos I organize into different playlists so that they're easy to find. So some of these playlists, like the planets grahas playlist, this bhavas playlist, yogas or planetary combinations playlist, may be helpful for you to find, other learning videos. Also, if you're into studying birth charts, if you're that kind of student, I recently published a video called Birth Chart Archive List 2024. So that it's a list of all the birth charts that I've analyzed on this channel that include famous people, places, and moments in time. Because the videos, you wouldn't necessarily know I've analyzed all these birth charts unless you get into the videos. They're not one-off videos. So that, for example, my monthly videos, I typically go through 2 or 3 birth charts. So if you like to dive into that kind of stuff, you can see the list of what I've analyzed and then see the video it's in so you can find it, check it out. Also, since this talk is an interpretive talk, I incorporate a lot of different concepts. So these videos, especially if you're a beginner, may be helpful to you and getting more out of this talk. So North, South, and East Indian style charts. I do cover Western style charts in that video as well, but it's not part of the title. Introduction to navigating a birth chart, introduction to the constellations or rashis, constellation or rashi categories, planetary aspects, neutral, benefic, and malefic planets or grahas, chidra grahas or planets of vulnerability, planetary exaltation and debilitation, nakshatras, also known as lunar mansions, bhavat, bhavam, house of the house concept. And then I go through several yogas, including parivartana yoga, exchange of houses, and pravraja yoga, life focus combination. And then also the lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house. So all that's out there if that's helpful to you. Okay, so let's take a look at the chart for this moment in time of the new moon or Amavasya. And the time here is May 7th, 2024, 23:22 in the evening, Eastern Standard Time. That's the time zone I live in. And you could see here, yeah, okay, well, you can't see here, but the day lord is Mars, and the Hora lord or our lord is Mercury. Okay, so Mars is a very erratic, fiery, rebellious planet. And Mercury is a planet that represents things like reason, analysis, logic, speech, education, travel, students. So you can see between these two planets already, there's some energy coming through about angry words or separatist words. The Dasha period or planetary period at this time is Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, Ketu. So Venus is a planet that represents things like sociability, social grace, relationships, loved ones. Saturn is a planet that represents things like obstacles, delays, bureaucracy, uh, separation to some extent. Jupiter represents things like justice, compassion, as does Venus. Education, again, teachers. And then K2 is sort of like Mars. It's a fairly erratic planet, but even more so and even more kind of hidden and unexpected. So I would get just through this planetary period, job period, uh, separation from loved ones, especially because Venus and Jupiter, the two great benefics, and you can see Venus and Jupiter here, part of the job period, are both combust, meaning that they're so close to the sun that you can't see them. They're essentially eclipsed by the light of the sun. So you won't be able to see on an external level, their external manifestations of things like grace and compassion and generosity. Yeah, so and then the thing is the Dasha period is switching to Venus, Mercury, Mercury on July 31st, 2024. So that's when you might see a fairly big shift in this energy. And with Venus, again, Venus is combust, and Mercury, as you can see in this chart, is in Pisces, and Mercury is debilitated in Pisces. So, this, so this, even when we come up to July, the end of July or so, once the kind of energy of this moment in time blows over, it looks like there's going to be like a repairing of communications because by that time Venus will be out of combustion. So repairing of communications and relationships and process of that, at least starting the process of that. Okay. So you can see there's already like, a tussling going on here. There's not a lot of cushion, and you'll see that throughout the analysis. Because again, Venus and Jupiter are combust. The moon is also combust because it's new. And Mercury is debilitated. The other thing is you can see here, Mercury has two malefic planets on it, Mars and Rahu. So Mercury essentially becomes a malefic planet. So the four planets that have any sort of really more benevolent energy, Venus and Jupiter being the two primary ones, are combust, so you won't see them. The moon potentially has some, um, positive energy coming from it, but it depends on where it is in relationship to the sun. And because it's new, it's going to be weak. Um, you won't get too much out of the moon. And then Mercury's debilitated with two malefics on it. So, you know, and Mercury swings either way. Again, if you watch my video on malefic and benefic planets, you'll know about this. But, Mercury can swing either way. When Mercury has a bunch of malefics on it, it becomes malefic. So again, not much in terms of soft spots to land at this moment in time. Okay, so let's get into the chart a little bit more, starting at the top. So this is a North Indian style chart. So the lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house, is that top diamond in the middle with a little 9 in the corner. The little 9 in the corner represents the ninth sign or constellation of zodiac, which is Sagittarius or Danu in Sanskrit. Okay, so that little 9 represents the sign of the zodiac and not the house. Okay, so we have ninth sign in the first house. Okay, so anyway, the Lugna nakshatra. So nakshatra is a lunar mansion. Every night the moon passes through a different nakshatra. So there are about 27 of these nakshatras. So as the moon goes through each nakshatra within a month or lunar month, 27 nights, it will go through each nakshatra. Okay, so the Lugna nakshatra is Mula. Now Mula has associated with it destructive energy. So yeah, so again, this is going to be a fairly rough moment in time. But let's go through and see what we can see. So Mula is symbolized by a bunch of roots tied together. And so the destructive process, part of the destructive energy associated with this is there's a deity associated with it, which is a form of Kali, the goddess of destruction. The other thing is that the uh, symbol of roots tied together, there's this idea of planting seeds potentially. But the thing is, when you plant a seed, it's a very transformative process, and the seed essentially has to just be destroyed or die unto itself in order to become a full-fledged plant. Yeah, in order to shoot up past the soil and, I don't know, shoot up some leaves or flowers or fruits or vegetables or whatever it's going to be. But it's an arduous journey. A lot of seeds don't make it to the top of the soil. So it's a precarious time. There is potential here. But as you'll see, again, because there's not a lot of at least outward manifestation of, goodness, benevolence, we may not see it. It might come, and I think it will come, but maybe not right at this time. Okay. So and because it's the Lugna nakshatra, that's kind of the overall energy for this whole chart. Okay. And then again, as I mentioned, Jupiter's combust. So, the ruling planet for this chart and the ruling planet for this Lugna is combust. You can't see it. The other thing is that Jupiter, you see, has gone to a negative house, a sixth house here. Sixth house represents things like enemies. It represents things like acute illness. It represents things like acute, problems. Um, so yeah, so there's a lot of, there's a lot of challenge here for sure. Then the moon nakshatra. The moon at this moment in time is in Bharani nakshatra. So Bharani is symbolized by a womb. So again, we have this kind of mixed energy of cycles of life and death. Because that's what happens, right? When a baby's born, again, the mother's identity changes. So especially first-time moms, goes from being a woman without a child to being a mother now. And again, it's an arduous process for the children to work their way through the womb. Unfortunately, not all children, make it. So it's more, I would say, fairly harsh and how do I say, potentially destructive energy, but also with potential here. So there's some potential, but again, it's hard to see at this moment. Okay. So let's go through. I usually start at the top in first house and go through, house by house to see what we can see. So moving up to the Lugna again. So we have Sagittarius or Danu Lugna. So Sagittarius is a dual fire sign. So there's going to be a, wavering quality potentially. And since it's a fire sign, it's all about action. So it's about kind of wavering actions. What do we do? What do we say? As you'll see here, because not only is Sagittarius a fire sign, but the ruling planet Jupiter is all about oral communication and teaching and education. So it's like, what do we do? What do we say? How do we, plant new seeds? Because again, it's with all the good planets essentially being compromised in various ways. Um, it's really hard to see the right path forward. Right actions or right speech, like what's going to help, bring this about. Because also Jupiter, as we see, is in a nakshatra of Krittika. Krittika is a dual nakshatra. So we have a dual lugna, rising sign. We have a dual ruling planet, and we have a dual planet and a dual nakshatra. So you can see there's like, which way do we go? Yeah, what do we do here? How do we fix this? At least there's some attempt. At least this is Jupiter. Even though Jupiter's combust and in a negative house, and the other thing is that Jupiter's a pure temporal benefic planet, meaning that Jupiter is the ruler of two positive houses. But the thing is, the ruler of those two positive houses, the first and fourth house, has gone to a negative house. So that's actually going to bring, unfortunately, negative consequences. To the situation. The thing though is like make sure you don't confuse temporal benefic with natural benefic, because Jupiter is a natural benefic. That's its natural state. But in this chart, temporal benefic and malefic planets are based on the planets that they own in a specific chart. So those you can't always translate from chart to chart. Depends on the chart. So anyway, Jupiter is in this nakshatra of Krittika. The symbol of that is Kartikeya, the victorious, celebrated victorious commander-in-chief of the celestial army. So, that's kind of a mixed bag because, again, we're still talking about kind of army and military and force and might. But it is victorious, so that's nice. And then it's also the celestial army, so kind of the higher beings, also at times go through skirmishes that need to be dealt with. But the other part of Krittika is that there's this energy of foster mother, because Kartikeya, the leader of the celestial army, was raised by different foster mothers. So even within the nakshatra, there's this duality of, are we going to fight our way through this? Or are we going to kind of love and nurture our way through this? Okay, and it's probably both, and that's probably also why there's a lot of confusion at this moment in time, because Mercury represents things, not only things like logic and analysis, but clarity of mind. And since Mercury's debilitated and it's got two malefics on it, and it's a malefic because of those two malefics, there's not a lot of clarity of mind and clarity of speech right now. So it's like, again, what's our philosophy? What kind of philosophy are we gonna use moving forward to try to ameliorate the situation, even though it's a, tough situation that's, I don't think, gonna be, repaired overnight or very quickly. Okay, the other thing is that Jupiter's gone to the sixth house, which is an artistana. An artistana is a house that represents like material wealth. So there's this attempt to make things better on the material plane, but the thing is, Jupiter's combust. So whatever, again, this is a seed that's being planted, and seed is within us internally. What's the kind of goodness we can bring to the situation? Um, but again, the seed you can't see, at least not right now. The other thing is that Jupiter is in a sign of Taurus, and Taurus is ruled by Venus, which is again also combust. So it's like the seed is combust, eclipsed, you can't see it, and field is combust or eclipsed, you can't see it. So again, that's why this is a fairly arduous moment here. It's going to be, I think, tough to see the other things that Jupiter represents externally. Things like teachers, things like students, and if you're watching the news in the United States, there's a lot of problems with university students, protesting affairs in the Middle East, and graduations are getting canceled, and uh, even things like, I was just reading this morning that like Columbia University is not too far from me. It's in New York City. I live close to New York City, and Columbia is a really pretty famous, prestigious law school. And so I was just reading this morning that some of the federal judges who typically have internships, that give like a one year internship to newly graduated law students, to help them in their career and kind of boost them up and stuff like that. There's several of them that said that they will not be hiring Columbia graduates. Only people who directly participated in these protests, but even people who were like haven't even entered Columbia Law School yet, like students who haven't even like you know, you know stepped a foot on campus potentially, are banned from internships. So and again, that's the thing, is Jupiter represents law, it represents justice. So you can see that, I mean, I don't, again, maybe it's just me, but I don't know how, like, a student that hasn't even started law school at Columbia University should be barred from an internship at the federal level. I mean, that doesn't seem fair. I mean, that's the thing, is I'm sure, but that's the thing, is everybody right now is going to be claiming, is in this mode of, this isn't fair, this isn't fair, and that's what this chart is showing us. Yeah. So, and the other thing, let's see. Oh, the other thing. So, as if Jupiter wasn't challenged enough. So Jupiter's combust. It's dispositor. Venus is combust. It's in a dual nakshatra. It's a dual planet. Um, but K2, you can take 5-9 aspects of K2 in this chart because its dispositor Mercury is aspecting it. So K2, as I mentioned briefly, is a very erratic planet. It's like Mars, so it's rebellious, it's fiery, it's, unpredictable, but it's got even more of a, like, I would say, a harsh quality to it, a hidden quality to it typically. And right now, K2's in a lunar mansion nakshatra called Hasta. Hasta is symbolized by hand, so planets in Hasta nakshatra can be very grabby. But the thing with K2, since you don't know which way it's going to go, And again, we're getting more of this, like, which way are things going to go? Is it going to be you want to grab things, or there's grabbing of things, or this like sudden release of things? And again, I think it's going both ways because K2's in a dual sign, Mercury. So K2 is going to be going both ways, and you have this erratic K2 aspecting Jupiter. It's kind of like, kind of like what I was mentioning about these federal clerkships or internships or whatever. You know, doesn't really have much to do. I mean, it's pretty indirect relationship with the student protests going on different campuses, not just Columbia. So I don't know why Columbia was singled out as like, maybe that's just the start of, a list of future law students who will not be allowed federal internships and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be even this much more challenge with Jupiter in terms of what do we keep, what do we let go of, in terms of philosophy, in terms of, you know, material building material things, building material wealth, related to also enemies. Like now we're seeing enemies here. Um, yeah, so there's it's just this K2 aspect on Jupiter is gonna, bring even more chaos and unexpected results to Jupiter. And again, Jupiter's the ruling planet for the whole chart. So I don't know that I need to say much more, but I will keep going on because I do. But you can see, I mean, already that this is, a pretty convoluted situation here. So if we take this all together, again, a lot of confusion over whether to fight or nurture, acute issues with what actions to take, regarding children, teachers, education, law. I've given you some, concrete examples, current concrete examples of that. Is it better to take control or let go? That's also being decided. What actions to take, new seeds of philosophy, spirituality. That's the thing also, is that Jupiter represents spirituality. So especially since, embedded within like the student protests in the Middle East, embedded within that is a lot of religious differences and the skirmishes and stuff like that. So what kind of, philosophy or spirituality is emerging from within to help in some way, hopefully, ameliorate the situation, which is clearly very tough. Um, the other thing to note is that in this chart, the chidra grahas, so the chidra grahas are planets of vulnerability. Um, I have a whole video on that if you're interested to learn more about that. But Mercury, which is already challenged because it's debilitated, and you have Saturn. Saturn is in its own sign. It's very strong, unlike these other planets, most of these other planets. And Saturn, it's in its own sign, which potentially can be good, and it's better than Saturn being in its debilitated sign for sure. But Saturn is in a nakshatra called Purva Bhadrapada, which is symbolized by the front legs of a funeral pyre. So Saturn is a planet that represents things like death, chronic illness, delays, disease, chronic disease, and funeral pyre. It's a very destructive type of energy there. So transformation for sure, destruction of the old. Saturn is in Aquarius, a fixed air sign, so fixed ideas. So there's a lot of part of what's going on here. Probably the strongest thing in this whole chart is this fixed idea um, type energy. The other planet that's very strong is Sun, because Sun is in its exalted sign. The thing is that Saturn, it's really strong. Saturn, you can see in the third house, is aspecting onto Sun. So you can even see this as like Sun is symbolized by the king or president or head of administration. And Saturn is like, the proletariat. I keep coming up with the word proletariat, but it's like it's sort of common man. Yeah. So this sort of destructive proletariat is really challenging administration, and that's what we're seeing on campuses. The other thing about this is that, especially if you're in the United States, back in the fall, Sun was in its own side of Leo, and Saturn was still in Aquarius. So you had this head-to-head match of Saturn in its own sign and Sun in its own sign. And during that time, I believe it was like around October or so, you had a we had a bunch of different protests, not just student protests, but we had a bunch of different protests, like and strikes. So like the automotive industry went on strike. Hollywood writers and actors went on strike. Who else went on strike? I forget now. Somebody else went on strike. I think the government was even, not the government was going to, but this government was going to be shut down for, bureaucratic reason, because Saturn can also represent bureaucracy and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, even though Sun is in a different position, you still have this really strong Sun up against this really strong Saturn. Because the only planets you can see in this chart are Saturn, Sun, Mars, and Mercury. Venus is combust, Moon is combust, Jupiter's combust, Rahu and Ketu you never see. So, it's a very, very biased situation. Um, but anyway, getting back to chidra grahas, so the planets of vulnerability, these are planets that can be kind of a thorn in your side or Achilles heel. You can kind of think of it that way. So Mercury, so again, students, I'm sure a lot of people are saying students is a pain right now. But speech and analysis and decision making, again, there's a lot of confusion here. Saturn, so, and then the moon by two. So the moon is like, the emotional mind, and Moon and Mercury here are the two planets representing the mind, the logical mind and the emotional mind. So there's a lot of, just um, especially with Saturn. Saturn can represent things like anxiety, depression, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of heaviness on the mind right now. The Moon can also represent public. So yeah, there's a lot of, how do we manage the public? How do we, you know, again, heal the situation? Yeah. So also with Saturn being in Aquarius, fixed air sign, that's also, that's also kind of a philosophy or old thoughts, old paradigms, like destroying of old thoughts and paradigms, especially because you have Saturn with Mercury and Moon. So there's going to be a lot of like people really defending their thoughts and ideas, although this might be sort of like a transition of that time as well. And as I mentioned, you can only see, malevolent planets at this time: Saturn, Mars, Mercury, and Sun. The other thing is we have two pravraja yogas here, so you can see the two big circles. In the fourth house, in the green circle is Mars, Rahu, Mercury. So, yeah, that's again pretty tough. That's pravraja yoga indicates like a life focus. So the fourth house in focus here, the fourth house represents things like home, happiness, mother, lineage. Also represents education. So you can see, Mars is can be like a cutting, violent planet. So yeah, you can see disruptions in education for sure. And the fourth house specifically represents like college level education, which is, where a lot of, at least in the news, that's what you're seeing, a lot of problems there. And then in the fifth house, you have Pravraja yoga of Venus, Sun, and Moon. So, and the fifth house represents things like children, problems with children. Also, the fifth house represents things like creativity, and you do have the two sort of aesthetic planets there, like Venus and Moon, which can represent like the arts, for example. Um, but the other thing is that the fifth house, the natural lord of the fifth house is Leo, that constellation, and Leo represents a stage. So this is like since the sun represents administration or president, this is going to be like administrations on stage, like in the public eye, like on the hot seat, essentially. I think you could see it that way. Um, yeah, so the two life focuses, but they kind of overlap in terms of there's going to be problems at home, problem with kids, problems with education, and you can see even like things like canceling canceling graduation ceremonies and stuff is going on now. Well, that's gonna, that's usually a big deal for a lot of families, especially if their kid is going to a school that's fairly far away. It's like, people will typically book tickets and book hotels and stay there and spend some time and enjoy the celebration. And it's like if that's all gone kaput, well, all that planning and, maybe taking time off of work to go visit your kid graduating, that's all gone. But then also, it's like that whole probably moment that the family has been looking forward to for years, is gone, up in smoke, So, yeah, a lot of disruptions there. I'm sure families are not happy. And it could be, again, the families are, because it's in a dual sign here, it's a dual sign in the fourth house. The families are probably not happy with administration, their kids, or both, like the whole situation, possibly. Depending, or they might be taking sides, maybe they think the kids are right or the administration's right, or, who knows? It's probably going both ways depending on the family. So, yeah, a lot going on here. But let's move on to the second house. So, what's interesting about the second house is you kind of get this lineup again of Jupiter because it's aspecting the house, and Jupiter's debilitated. Yeah, it's like Jupiter can't catch a break. Jupiter's debilitated in Capricorn. And the second house represents things like oral speech, which Jupiter also represents. Um, but even though Saturn is there, it's one of the planets that's still visible. Again, Saturn's in Purva Bhadrapada. So, it's almost like anything that's said is going into this like um, fire, getting burned up, churned up, because the dispositor of the second house is this Saturn. Then again, you have Jupiter and K2 lined up again, because K2 is also aspecting the same house. So again, you get this disruptive energy in the second house of families and inner circle and speech, communication, oral communication. K2 also represents hiddenness, and like if you watch some of the videos about the students, for example, a lot of them have hidden their faces. They're wearing scarves and goggles and masks and stuff like that. So there's this like disruptive, unusual, chaotic speech, hidden, by hidden people, hidden people. Um, and you can see, we haven't gotten there yet, but then you get Jupiter and K2 again in the 10th house of daily activity and work. So you can see there's this Jupiter K2, combination in at least 3 different houses out of 12. It's a lot of chaos going on here. Yeah, so the second lord is this Swa Saturn. So there's strength here, but also like strength and, sort of being destructive in a way. And then K2 adds more to that mix. So again, overall, the second house disturbances with family, inner circle, also finances, um, trying to regain, or healing on some level, but I'm not sure it's at least really steady right now. This could also be two-sided talk, and not offering compassion because again, Jupiter's combust and debilitated in the second house. So Jupiter's pretty much toast there. It's not going to offer or bring much benevolence. And Jupiter is a dual planet in a dual nakshatra. So this could be like, one day the administration says this, and the next day the administration says that, and also everybody involved in this, not just administration, but students as well. The third house is Swa Saturn, very strong. So strength through change for siblings, neighborhoods, and forming and ending of policies and bureaucracy. So that's part of what's, students are protesting, at least in theory, is they're wanting universities to divest from investing in, I think, is really um, sponsored or based organizations or something like that. So, um, yeah. So, uh, yeah. Um, and again, there's going to be all this. The third house represents things like written communication. So there's going to be a lot of written policies that are probably standing still at, play here. And that's where probably a lot of people, like students and administrators, are leaning on documents, policies that have already been laid down to help them decide what to do because it's so chaotic right now. Um, but the thing is, it's some of these policies, are part of what's, potentially going down the drain since Saturn is, in Purva Bhadrapada. So, both sides of policy making here and bureaucracy. The fourth house, I've been talking about a little bit. The fourth house lord is combos Jupiter. So there's no base here either. Literally, even without these malevolent planets in the fourth house, that would mean that the fourth house is combos. So, lost. You can't see it. So families like, maybe the families, are like, well, there's no graduation. We're not coming out, spending all this money to come out to see you if there's no graduation. And, uh, you know, um, Mars here is in Uttara Bhadrapada, so the back legs of funeral pyre. Uttara Bhadrapada is a little bit more contained than Purva Bhadrapada. Purva Bhadrapada can just be like sort of a raging fire potentially. But Uttara Bhadrapada has this sense of like a conscious release or letting go of something rather than just a, burning, raging, burning, uncontrollable fire. And Rahu is there. Rahu represents things like ambition. So there's this like, and luckily, a little bit of softness here. Rahu and the debilitated Mercury are in a nakshatra of Revati, which is about like also endings because it's the last nakshatra and the last sign. But there's more of this sort of like travel is related there and hospitality is related there. But you can see with these three, there's like conscious release of travel and hospitality related to education and family. So bye bye, graduation ceremony. You can see there. Um, yeah. And the other thing is the fourth house represents things like happiness. So um, family lineage. So I'm sure some students are getting in trouble with their families. Their families aren't supportive of whatever actions that they've taken one way or the other. And fourth house also represents vehicles and Mercury can represent things like transportation. So, like in my neck of the woods, not too far from me, um, just a few days ago, there was a big oil tanker that got turned over, set on fire, and it destroyed a whole bridge. So Mars can be a chemistry, which, oil and combustion, and it can represent things like fire. Rahu can represent unusual sun surprises, and Mercury, again, transportation, commuting. So, and like, I don't know how they did it, but they actually managed to take down, they have to replace the bridge because the whole thing got, messed up. So they took down the whole bridge over the weekend. So in my area, it could be, that sort of thing where that kind of, major unusual disturbance and traffic. But also, like with the students protesting, I mean, they've set up like encampments and stuff like that. So you can't like, walk your way through the campus. And also because of the student protests, some of the universities have called in police and things like that, and they've set up barricades so you can only enter in certain entrances on campus and so you can see like traffic is being up, upheaval as well. The other thing is Rahu by itself as a planet can represent things like mental illness and obsession, compulsion, illusion, delusion, confusion. You have Mercury, the analytical planet debilitated, so that's more confusion. So there's a lot of, and Mercury is like speech and Mars is action, so there's a lot of confusion about what to say and do on so many levels, yeah. Um, and so when I take all this together, what did I write here? Confused, obsessive effort to say or do something to regain happiness after conscious changes or release in, you know, uh, leaving family, home, transportation, vehicles. Um, the other thing is that this could be just like, frankly, the knocking down of these encampments because now they're sort of coming through a lot of these campuses and just like bulldozing them out of the way. because they don't meet, policy, which again is this Saturn and Swan and Aquarius in the third house. The other thing is that I've mentioned a few times in my videos is that when you get Mercury and Mars together, you can get like a liar's combination, frankly. But it depends, not always. But the thing is that here, Mercury is debilitated. So, that's kind of leaning, makes things lean a little bit more that way. The other thing is that Rahu is a sign or a planet that represents, you know, um, hiddenness and confusion and definitely not being straightforward. So, I think there's a lot of just double talk and I would say bluffing here, because that's essentially what's going on. I think it probably works both ways in terms of like, especially with the student situation, bluffing of the uh, you know students and then the administration both ways to try to do each other. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. Things tend to escalate, but also things like some of the stuff going on in the Middle East. Not that I want to go deep into that because that's very, if the student protest stuff is very um, mm, inflammatory, the Middle East is even more so, I think. But, just in terms of the way things have been, escalating or trying to de escalate and that sort of thing. And I think they was it noticed by Israel for people to evacuate Rafah. And then I think Hamas accepted a ceasefire proposal, but then Israel bombed and stuff like that, or took it over, or something like that. Um, again, it's like, are people listening to each other, or do they have like a certain agenda? What can we even trust here? Can we trust what people are saying or not? Yeah, so all of that, whether it's on a more local microcosm of self or community or, in other places around the world, you can see how these planetary and star energies are playing out pretty consistently. And again, whether you agree with it or not, but you can see like something's not lining up here, in terms of what's being said and what's being done. And that's all coming from this, a lot of it's coming from this Mars, Rahu, Mercury situation of, you know, can we believe what people are saying, Anyway, and then the fifth house here, the fifth house lord is Mars. Mars is, um, oh, sorry, is Mars, which is already very confused. You can see we've just talked about. And we have a combust combust Venus here, a new moon. So it's essentially combust moon and exalted sun. So you have a very strong administration here, even though it's challenged by this Saturn, very strong Saturn. And Venus and moon are here. So that's kind of a double whammy in a way, because I think deep within Venus and moon, well, all these planets are in the nakshatra of Bharani, which is again the womb symbol of, bringing end to things and birth to things. So I think deep within, there's a lot of emotion here because Venus and Moon are the emotional planets. So I think deep within, although you can't see it, the administration is very emotional. But again, they've got their poker face on, and this might also be this Mars, Rahu, Mercury. Like, don't let them see how you really feel. Like, because again, the facial expressions and stuff like that, the physical expressions are not matching the actions, right? So again, it's like, do we trust this or what do we trust here? Yeah. So the administration is very emotional, but they're not showing it. Um, there may be, compassion deep within and stuff like that. But again, we're not seeing it. Everybody's got their game face on, looks like. What else here? Oh, the fifth house again represents children, creativity, also counseling. So I'd say this is like a deeply confused and emotional leadership. Um, of children and counsel just like really essentially falling through, because even though there may be some platform in the fifth house, because Mars is still visible, then Mars, Mars's platform is this combos Venus, sorry, combos Jupiter. Yeah. So, again, it all kind of like seems like there's a solid base, and then it's like you take a step back and you're like, nope, it's not there. So, yeah. So again, it just seems like whatever efforts are there, kind of sliding through the cracks. Because again, what is not the only planet not in a sign of Venus or Jupiter, or the debilitated Mercury, or Mars, which is in also in a sign of a combust Jupiter, is Saturn. So even though Saturn is on fire right now, it's the strongest planet in this chart. So it's going to bring all that Saturnian energy and Purva Bhadrapada energy through the whole chart. So again, a very challenging moment here. But let's move on to the other houses. So here, same info on the left, different houses on the right here. So then if we look at the sixth house I mentioned, so we have a combos Venus Lord and combos Jupiter aspected by Ketu. So very chaotic space for acute problems related to finding some sort of like solid ground with education, teachers, enemies, sort of thing. Um, Also, the law, Jupiter represents that. So having a solid legal ground. And again, a lot of confusion, I would say. Children, teachers, speech, all these things are seen as enemies right now. Then we have the seventh house here. The seventh house lord is this debilitated Mercury. It's aspected by Mars. So Mars is aspecting not only the seventh house of independent business and relationships, but Mars is on the dispositor. So Mars is on both house and the house lord. So that's going to bring a lot of this confusing action to relationships, and also a conscious release of relationships as well, because all of the skirmishing and stuff like that, like the students, I think some of the universities are suspending, if not expelling, maybe some of these students, is what I've been hearing. And Mars is a fiery planet, and again, it's an Uttara Bhadrapada, so release and chopping, on the chopping block, relationships on the chopping block. You could see it that way. On the eighth house here, we don't have any planets aspecting, but the eighth house is new moon. So starting a new cycle for sure, but a very unstable psychology. So again, not no real soft spot in this chart to land so far, and we're almost done with that. But a lot of upheaval psychologically deep within. It's like, how do we even how do we get our hands on this? How do we grapple with this? Then the ninth house lord is the sun. The sun is in bhavat bhavam. So bhavat bhavam, the ninth lord is gone nine houses away to the fifth house. And then this ninth house is aspected by this massive Saturn. So a lot of public issues, because the sun is now on the hot seat and public view in the fifth house. Counseling regarding administration and leadership. The other thing is that, like, because of this bhavam, you have one administration after another getting involved here. So because it's like whatever the powers that be normally handle, like for example, the student relationships, are having a hard time. Now it's like now you're getting like the regents involved and the board of directors, and it's like all these different layers of administration are getting involved here, and they're all in public view. Yeah, and they're all like publishing statements and things like that. Yeah. So a lot of strong opposition to administration through, again, the common man proletariat. And then what else? Oh, the other thing is you have a sort of like you have Mars on both Mercury and yeah, you have Mars on Mercury in both the 7th house and the 10th house. But you also have Saturn on Sun and the house that Sun owns, which is the 9th house. So Saturn and Mars, you're seeing them. So that's why you're having all these like, skirmishes and also potentially like military and law enforcement type energy coming in to try to contain this mess that's going on here. Um, yeah, and then as I mentioned, this massive Saturn versus a very strong Sun, that's where you're getting this like protesting energy going on. And strikes, and essentially that's what's going on here. In the 10th house, you have a debilitated Mercury as the Lord, aspected by Mars again, aspected by Jupiter, aspected by K2. So the Mars and K2 are going to be cutting and ending things. Mercury and Jupiter are communication, our media, our news, our speech. And so you have all this cutting of these things, right? Release of these things and ending of these things, cutting of communication, the news and education, that sort of thing. And then, for example, I was reading in Israel, they just cut off one of the cable channels, I think Al Jazeera, so it kind of an opposing voice or whatever. They just, I think, closed that down or even closed down the headquarters or something in Israel so that that news can't be broadcast in Israel. So that's like another outpicturing of the energy we're seeing here in the chart. Um, so again, that's why like I thought the theme for the month is like finding voice and justice because Jupiter is intimately involved with the which represents both those things, voice and justice, and Jupiter's combust. So month of May, Jupiter is going to be combust until June 2nd or 3rd. So the month of May is, going to be a lot more of this because Venus is also combust. The if you watch my monthly videos, see towards the end of the month, we're starting to see maybe a little bit more softness on some level. Excuse me, but the month of May is going to be pretty tough, I think. Mostly because Venus and Jupiter are combust. Then the 11th house here, the 11th house lord is this combust Venus, aspected by Mars, Sun, and eclipsed, new moon. So the two emotional planets here, and then the two leadership planets here. So the emotional attempt to regain control of groups and society, that's the 11th house, and probably also income here because that's part of what the students are protesting. They're like wanting universities to divest, right? They don't want universities to generate income through investments related to Israel. At least that's what's on the table for them. And yeah, and then the 12th house here, the 12th house lord is Mars, aspected by Saturn and Jupiter. So there's a loss of policies here. There's a loss of fairness here, justice here, frankly. It's kind of like some of this is getting blown to the wind because it's just, let's try to contain this before it completely blows up. But the thing is, it might not be blowing up, but I think it might be imploding. Because again, the ruler of this whole chart is Jupiter. And it's combusts, and then it's in Mula. So, any sort of seeds or planting of justice here, they might be getting uprooted, frankly. So, so yeah, a very challenging moment for sure. You can see 5 houses are eclipsed also. You can think about it that way because Venus owns 2 houses, Jupiter owns 2 houses, and the moon. So 5 out of 12 houses are eclipsed. So not a lot of stability. 3 planets are combusts. The other thing is that, the kendras, so the 4 houses in the middle, that's the core energy of the chart, or if this was a person, for example, that's their core energy. And 2 of them are combust because they're owned by Jupiter, because this is all the dual charts here all dual charts, the two planets owning the four houses in the middle are Jupiter and Mercury. Okay, so that's important to know as we go through the amshas and subcharts, because you'll see why it's like pretty phenomenal what comes up there. But okay, so two of the four kendras are combust because they're owned by Jupiter, and the other two are debilitated because Mercury's debilitated and Mars is on Mercury. So there's a very, like, again, very chaotic center here. What I'm seeing here is the center is not holding. So again, there's like implosion going on here. Um, it's like it's all kind of falling, into like quicksand or something like. Um, and then I mentioned Jupiter is a pure temporal benefic going to sixth house. That's going to bring negativity, even though Jupiter is a benefic planet, natural benefic, and it's a temporal benefic because it's gone to a negative house. It's going to be, negative consequences to both the first and the fourth house. The only planets visible, as I mentioned, Sun, Mars, the two leadership planets, Mercury and Saturn. So there's going to be a lot of like Mercury and Saturn are very separatist type planets. Saturn because of like kind of physical distance, bureaucracy, that sort of thing, delays. Mercury because it's such a analytical planet, like just being in the mind. And then you get Mars and Saturn together, you can get things like you know, initiative and endurance. So there's this like strong initiative to just like squelch this effort. And I would even say voice because not only does Jupiter represent voice, but Mercury represents communication. So it's just like we're just going to like shut this all down type energy in a very calculated way by leadership. I haven't talked about medical stuff, but clearly, like, since Sun, Mars are the two fire or pitta planets, a lot of inflammation. Mercury and Saturn represent skin, so you can see a lot of inflammation of skin. And then Sun, Mercury, Saturn all represent the nervous system. Different parts. The Sun represents the central nervous system, Mercury the peripheral nervous system, and Saturn the neuromuscular junction. So a lot of skin issues, nerve issues, inflammation, pain. I could see here. So again, there was barely a soft spot, through this whole um, chart. A lot of instability here. So let's see what the amshas. Let me go through the amshas now and see what else we can see. See, during this Dasha period and the coming Dasha period in late July, how things might be shifting a bit. So these are again the subzodiacs or amshas, divisional charts, all different names for the same thing. So let's look at relationships because it did seem like based on the natal chart, relationships were definitely, you know, uh, challenged at this moment in time. So just as a reminder, at the top here I've listed current Dasha period is Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, K2, and that's shifting to Venus, Mercury, July 31st. So what I've circled in these charts are these planets, so like Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, K2, because those are the planets that are we're assessing right now, and then also Mercury. We will, it's coming up. And again, just as a reminder, these amshas are mostly used for timing. You do get some additional detail and um, kind of nuance that comes, but you've always got to take the information from the amshas and bring it back to the natal chart. They're not, you don't typically analyze these as standalone charts. Okay? Just FYI. I've seen some people get confused about that. Um, so anyway, again, we're also talking about timing here. So of the planets that are active through the current Dasha period or coming online to be active, Venus and Jupiter are not well placed. They're in negative houses. So and Jupiter is debilitated. So you can see in the eighth house here of deep psychology. So not a lot of deep compassion here. And typically the D9, the Navamsha here, this first chart, the Navamsha D9, which represents things like spouse and partnerships. But there's not a whole lot of compassion here deep within. And you can see that Jupiter is the Lord You can see this is a dual. Both of these charts here are dual, not lugnas. So keep count and watch on that, because by the time we get to the end, you'll see like most of these amshas are also dual. So what I was just talking about in terms of the center not holding, because again, Jupiter is the lord of two of the kendras in all these dual charts I'm going to go through. And I'm going to go through, I think, 16 amshas. Okay. The majority of them are dual charts. So even on a deeper level, the center is not holding here. Okay. And the other thing is, again, the other planet in these dual charts is a debilitated Mercury. And you can see already Mercury's debilitated again here in the D9. So, confusion with words, that sort of thing. Speech, students. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. Like, actually these amshas more or less just reiterate what's going on in the natal chart. So, but to what extent this, especially this time, I was like pretty shocked. So, um, yeah. So anyway, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mercury are all debilitated in this chart. K2 is a separatist again, erratic planet. And its dispositor is this debilitated Mercury that's going to make K2 more unstable. So even though, and then Saturn's debilitated here. So even though K2 and Mercury or Saturn are, technically, in positive houses and better that than not, they're all three of them are still challenged here. And then what else? Also, not only is K2 in a dispositor of this debilitated Mercury, but Saturn, this debilitated Saturn's on K2. And K2 and Saturn and Mercury are all separatist planets. So a lot of destruction of relationships right now. Separation and changing in relationships with partners of different kinds. Also, Mars is on aspecting Saturn. Mars is aspecting into its own sign. So it's going to be like a fire release or destruction of groups, kind of like again, the student encampments and stuff like that on campus. I mean, they're just getting bulldozed. And again, you can, think about that in different levels, on a more personal level or global level, what's going on there. There's an attempt to salvage things through speech, because this Jupiter is aspecting the second house of family and oral communication, where it's exalted. But again, Jupiter is combust. So, and Venus and Jupiter, you can see, are in negative houses, kind of out of the fray, and they're going to carry their combustion to these amshas. So they still can't do much good, and especially with Jupiter being debilitated. But there's very little, even if Jupiter wasn't combust, it's still debilitated here. So again, not a lot of compassion in regards to relationships. Rahu is also there in the seventh house. So again, there's some ambition here towards relationships and salvaging them maybe, but I think it's a not much ends to not. Then we have the D3, the Draconets for siblings. So we saw that massive Saturn in the in the third house in the natal chart. So the third house represents siblings, and even though Saturn is strong there, it's in that nakshatra of Purva Bhadrapada, funeral pyre, destruction and release. So I would imagine that siblings are getting into the fray here. And you can see here that this is a Vargodama Lugna and also Lugnatia here. So this is the same rising sign chart as the natal chart. So that means this is important. Jupiter and Mercury are not well placed. So again, speech, education, news, all, challenged here. There's an exalted Saturn, but it's aspecting first house here. So all that destructive energy and delays and obstacles Saturn is bringing to this subchart here. And it's also, Saturn is also on the moon and the sun, parents. So it might be that the sibling is connecting from parents, kind of thing. Mercury is in the 12th house of law, so loss of speech, school, reason. And the dispositor is a debilitated Mars in the 8th house here. So there's a lot of, chaotic anger and ambition deep in the psychology here related to siblings, even though these planets aren't active. They are on active planets like Mars with K2 in the 2nd house. That could be like a fiery outburst with family or speech with family. And then Mars is on Saturn, fiery, angry speech or actions in public and groups. Mars on Saturn, this could be, again, military energy here. Military energy. So again, this is like the law enforcement, I think, that's being brought in to, like the student, to help out the universities and make sure the students aren't going too far out of bounds, literally and figuratively. Um, yeah, and then K2 and Mars in the 2nd house. The 2nd house not only represents family, but inner circle. So, yeah, I think siblings are involved here, even though they're strong. They're strong in, again, cutting ties. Just like there's a strong Saturn in the 3rd house, but again, it's in Purva Bhadrapada, so all this destructive energy is going to come through. Saturn's in the Purva Bhadrapada and Mars is in Uttara Bhadrapada. So 2 of the 4 planets that are visible are in these sort of release and let go, energies in terms of their star astrology. So yeah, siblings definitely challenged, even though could be worse. Yeah, but still. Okay, then we have the Saptamsha D7 here for children, and the Dwadashamsha D12 for parents and grandparents. So in the children's chart, Mercury's not well placed, so students not doing well, and Mercury's debilitated again. So keep track of that because that keeps happening, as you'll see as I go through the different amshas. The thing is, it is bhanga because Jupiter is on it, aspecting on it, so that'll bring Mercury up a little bit to some degree. But Jupiter can't do that much because Jupiter's combust. So how much is that going to lift Mercury up? I'm not sure. Then you have, look at all these planets, all these active planets, Saturn, K2, Venus, all in the 7th house of relationships. Saturn and K2 separatist planets. So a lot of ending of relationships. The other thing is Venus is there, but Venus is combust, and Jupiter's aspecting there, but Jupiter's combust. So any kind of attempts to ameliorate, or save, salvage relationships might be going down the drain. We do have Jupiter and Mars here together in the 11th house. So Mars and Jupiter usually represents things like law, and it's in the house of politics, or not politics, but groups and income. So a lot of laws and regulations related to those things, which is, again, part of what's going on with the student protests. The other thing is Saturn is active at this current Dasha period, and Saturn is aspecting its own sign. So it's almost like we're getting a recreation of this Saturn, really strong Saturn here from the natal chart. Temporary strength is proletariat, but, it's a short moment here. And the thing is, the proletariat's being fairly destructive, so it is what it is. So then we go into the parents chart here, the Dwadashamsha D12. All grahas are well placed except K2, and K2 is the shortest moment in time here. So, and K2 is exalted, not exalted, but swa. So there's some strength here, and again, release of neighbors and siblings and friends who are like siblings, that sort of thing. But you can see Mercury here and Jupiter. Let me see. So again, I didn't see this as being this is probably the best sub amsha in the whole batch that I did. that I looked at in terms of, positive. And it seems like, again, Venus is in its own sign in the ninth house of authority, even though it's combust. There's some, how do I say, Rahu's there too. So there's some ambition here with authority. So this might be like parents and grandparents trying to, amend things or heal things, based on the student's behalf. I'm sure the universities are getting called to come in and, save their kid from getting expelled or whatever it is. Um, and But I think the parents and grandparents, I think, are mostly staying out of the mix, is what I was seeing here. Um, they're kind of watching this. I almost kind of got this feeling of like, been there, done that. We've, we've done our own share of protesting and getting involved and that sort of thing. And I kind of got the feeling they were kind of more on the sidelines here, listening to the news and media and following children and authorities from the sidelines, but not really being active. Um, I mean, you do have like this Mars debilitated in the sixth house of enemies, and Mars represents enemies, and that's aspecting the ninth house of authority. So again, I think this is like parents and grandparents trying to talk as best they can with authorities to try to ameliorate things for the kids, especially the students. Um, you do also have here, but I mean, the stuff is definitely on the mind. Mars is aspecting the Lugna, where it's aspecting not only the Lugna but Mercury, and Mars is a sole enemy of Mercury. That's a concept to use in analyzing the amshas, not the natal chart. But you'll also see that's another thing to keep track of as I go through the amshas, how many times Mars and or Saturn is on Mercury. I mean, it's like astounding how much, but Mars is on Mercury a number of times, and Mars is, again, not only planet of enemies, representing enemies, but it's the sole enemy for specifically Mercury in the Amshas, so that keeps coming up. Um, but I think there's a bit of a detachment here, trying to keep a level head despite all the, craziness going on around. K2, I mentioned Swa in the third house, so temporary but quick separation from siblings and neighbors. So the parents and grandparents, I think, are doing what they can, but I don't think they're like jumping into the fray the way the students are. I think they're standing on the sidelines trying to do what they can by talking to administration and stuff like that as much as they can, to what extent they can, I would say. Okay, then we have education and career here to look at. So the top chart is Sidamsha D24 for education, and the second chart is the Dashamsha D10 for career. Okay, so the first chart here, Jupiter's not well placed. The other planets are. So, that's good, helpful. We'll take it. But I would see here that there are going to be long-term legal issues because the Lugna is ruled by Saturn. And Saturn is Swa again. It's a Vargotama Saturn. But you can see Saturn is not only the ruler of the Lugna, but also the second house of things we've been talking about: speech, family, inner circle, oral communication, that sort of thing. Um, yeah, and then Saturn is on Mars, and Saturn is on Jupiter, which is already combust in a negative house. So, um, yeah, this is just squashing again. I see this just squashing energy, and Mars is Swa here. And Mars is aspecting the seventh house, where it's debilitated. So, again, ending of relationships here. You also have Mars and K2. Their energy is involved with the 10th house of daily activities. So that's all, a lot of kids or students are having to do class from home because of all the stuff going on campuses. Um, I would see like potentially long-term legal issues here. Some protection from physical loss because you do have Jupiter. Um, aspecting the 12th house of loss and its own sign. But again, Jupiter's combust, so how much is that going to do? I don't really know. Jupiter's pretty challenged right now. But you do have Jupiter aspecting Mars, so that's going to carry through legal issues here. Also, what else do we have? Oh, we have a parivartana between Mercury and Venus. Mercury is again, represents students, and it's in the fifth house of children. And Venus is in the ninth house of administration. So you can see this tension when you get a parivartana. You can get tension between the houses that are in exchange. So you get a tension between children and administration, which is, yes, very much true. Um, what was I getting here? I have like sun and natal chart. What do I have out here? Let me just see. I'm trying to sure why I wrote that note. Maybe it'll come back to me. Yeah, I'll have to think about that. Maybe it'll come back to me. But yeah, definitely harsh words and coming through in the second house, affecting groups and clubs, groups in society. The 11th house here, the Saturn aspecting these different things. Um, and then yeah, just the daily chaos. What else here? Mom and dad are out of the mix. They're in the third house, negative house, and the moon is combust, and then the dispositor for moon and sun is this combust Jupiter that's in a negative house, aspected by this massive Saturn. So yeah, even though I think parents might be trying to do something, I'm not sure they have much say in what's going down here on campuses and education. Um, Anything else? No, so it's pretty much reverberated from the main chart here. Then the Dashamsha D10 career, Jupiter, Venus, Saturn not well placed. So the two benefics are out of the way, but they're combust anyway, so that's not helpful. So what's left here is you have Mercury and K2 and the Kendras here. They're both positively placed, but you can see K2 is with Sun and it's aspected by Saturn. So there are all these malefics on K2 in daily activities. So there might be upending of daily activities and career. And because of the Saturn K2 mix here and Mercury, I was getting like energy of and Mars is on Mercury again. I didn't draw the arrow, but Mars and Mercury again. And Mars and Mercury together can represent things like computers and technology. And K2 can represent technology. So what I was seeing here was again, no real compassion here with relationships. Jupiter going to the 10th, 12th house of loss and debilitated there. This could be loss of personnel, like literally humans here, loss of personnel, especially like senior staff. Um, excuse me. And then you have K2 in the 10th house, and again, Mars, Mercury in the 1-7 axis. What I was seeing here was like, replacing people with technology, maybe AI. Loss of senior staff, maybe bringing in outside support. So again, if people are protesting, you might have to bring in other people to take over positions. And so there's like this, and you can see here administration, right, is the ninth house. The lord of that is Venus, which is combust. It's also debilitated here with Saturn. And Mars is on it as well. So there's this like loss of administration, sort of athletic, sort of really, how would I say, really strong effort by administration, maybe a wayward effort to fill in the gap um, of people with outside help and technology. So, and a lot of daily disruptions is what I'm seeing here. So, yeah, career is definitely getting. challenged here as well. I'm just trying to see something. Yeah. I think this Mars and Mercury again. So again, you're going to be all, throughout these amshas you could see, and even in the main chart, Mars with Mercury over and over again. It's like, conscious release of students, conscious release of speech, conscious release of education. So, a lot of things getting cut here. Okay, then these three amshas are the wealth amshas. So at the top we have the Rudramsha D11 for income, the Chatrashamsha D4 for assets, and the Shodashamsha D16 for vehicles. And you can see again that 2 out of 3 of these are dual charts. And the mid one here, the D4, is Virgodama Lagna, as well as Lagnatia again. So not only is it a Sagittarius rising chart, but Jupiter's gone to Taurus in the 6th house again. And you'll see over and over again that Jupiter is, I think, the main planet that keeps going to negative houses, and it's combust, and just over and over again, it's like Jupiter's toast. And again, Jupiter representing things like teachers, educations, justice, law. So all that's getting trumped in this moment in time. But let's go through the D11. Jupiter and Ketu are not well placed, but Jupiter and Mars are in parivartana, which is good in a way. But when you get Jupiter and Mars all over parivartana, you typically get legal issues, which we've already been through. So that's not really anything new, but you get more of that related to income. But that's again what's being challenged here by the students is, how are universities making their money? And they're asking university to divest from certain funds, funding different campaigns in the Middle East. Then you have, let's see, you also have again here, and this happened a few times, Mercury again in the 5th house, Venus again in the, um, what is it, the 9th house of administration. So students, administration, you're getting those again. What else? K2 dispositor. Okay, K2 dispositor here is a swan. Mercury. Mercury's a little bit, more strong here in this chart because it's in its own sign, but it's in the 5th house. So you can see that student advisory. You can see it that way. Students are advising release of long-term income assets, that sort of thing. Mercury is stronger here. Venus is also strong. So again, it's like this, tension in some ways of like, strong administration versus the students trying to advise the administration. The other thing is Jupiter is aspecting Venus, and that's very challenged. Jupiter is challenging administration. So all these things like law and conflict, administration is just kind of more of the same thing. The other thing is that you have again Saturn aspecting its own sign of the Lugna here. So there's strength here with income, but I think over time, there's going to have to be there might be some temporary changes, but then things should um, we'll get back online once you move to the Venus Mercury period. Mm. Then the Chatrashamsha D4 for assets. Again, this is Virgodama Lugna and Lugnatia here. Saturn and Jupiter not well placed. This chart's very similar to the natal chart. A lot of harsh words and actions. You have Saturn aspecting its own sign in the 2nd house of world communication. Um, Acute legal issues with Jupiter in the 6th house again. Loss of property and proletariat. The common man and stuff. That's all that 2nd house stuff. Saturn is aspecting onto the 2nd house, the 6th house, and the 9th house. So difficulties with speech families. They're acute as well as administrative issues here. Because you also see Saturn is on Sun again, kind of like it is in the natal chart. Saturn is on Sun, and Leo, which is ruled by the Sun, which is the 9th house. So a lot of long-term issues here for administrative people. I would say a lot of loss of assets. So all the things that the students are breaking, windows and doors and furniture and stuff. maybe even like the ground or whatever that they're, kind of messing with. Then we have here the Shodashamsha D16. I don't typically go through vehicles, but from the beginning I mentioned the fourth house also represents vehicles and the tanker truck that turned over in my woods. I'm just curious here. So again, another dual lugna here. Jupiter, Saturn, K2 not well placed. So, um, you can see, even though they're not well placed, Saturn is Swa in the 12th house of loss, and K2 is there. So there will be some restoration, I think, of vehicles, but for the moment, in this moment in time, there is a problem, and also with transportation. But once we move into Venus, Mercury, that should be better because Venus and Mercury are in positive signs, and Venus will be back out of combustion. But there will be disruptions here. You can see with like transportation and getting to work. We have Mars with Venus here, so Mars will cause disruptions. And then we have this massive Saturn again, Ergodom of Saturn, um, on the second house again. You can see it's like over and over again, where Saturn is debilitated there. And so Sun is there, Moon is there, Mercury's there. So students, parents, issues with transportation. So again, like these graduations that are being canceled, and all the flights, I'm guessing, are being canceled or changed, or I don't know what they're doing with that. So yeah, a lot of disruptions we're seeing here with vehicles and transportation. Let's see. Yeah, I think I mentioned most of those. And then this K2 again, this is an unusual issue that's popped up. So again, sudden disruption of graduation or the sudden blowing up of a tanker truck, that sort of thing. So yeah, you can see it there too. Then we have the health amshas here. So the top one is the D6 for acute issues, the Tajik Shashtamsha. Then the D8 for chronic issues, Tajik Ashtamsha. Then the D27 for strength and resilience, the Bhamsha here. So let's take a look. The first chart here, Jupiter and Ketu are not well placed. So again, Jupiter is not in a positive sign. And positive house, I should say. Jupiter and K2 not well placed. Mercury is debilitated again. Venus is, and you can see Mercury's in the 5th house again. Venus is in the 9th house again. So you can see like this, this occurs several times throughout the amshas, which is interesting. Mercury is debilitated again. It's in the 5th house, Venus in the 9th house. So decisions to cut or block people, I'm seeing here. And students, I would say, like Mars is again on Mercury on the 2nd house. So there's this warning or actual, oral communication to let go of students who are attempting to counsel, but not in probably best or most appreciated ways. And you do have a parivartana between Moon and Venus here between, again, relationships, house of relationships and house of authority, but they're both kambas, so how much good they're doing, hard to say. Let's see. Suppose 10th house here. Why do I have that? I'm not sure about my notes. Sorry, this is like, it's a lot and it was kind of over and over again, so I'm not sure what I wrote that. But anyway, what I'm saying here is that even with the Parivartan, the administration is not very stable or compassionate. And again, administration, it can be like government as well if you're looking on a larger scale here, but a lot of and a lot of emotions as well. I'm not sure that, it's probably a completely unstable situation for administration. They're feeling it. Let's see, Mercury's aspect, and that's the other thing. Mercury's aspecting this 9th house of authority And Mars is debilitated there, so there's going to be even that much more upheaval with administration. Let's say losses through speech and counsel, um, because Mercury's debilitated, Mars is on it, so you're cutting out speech, and then Jupiter's in the 12th house of losses. And I would say there's a lot of deep anger driving this. I mean, Mars is in the second house of oral communication. Mars is aspecting the eighth house of deep psychology. Mars is aspecting the fifth house of speech and also intellect and advisement here. So, yeah, I think the administration's just getting fed up and there are acute issues. So that's why they're maybe they don't feel like they have time, or they're not taking the time to come up with more diplomatic solutions, a lot of them. So there's problems there. Then let's see, the D8 chronic issues. Well, the only planet that's not well placed is K2, and that's the shortest antara or subperiod here. So again, mm, I think there are long-term issues, but um, this will, blow over. I'm not sure, especially the student protests, how long this will. For some people, again, if their chart is and their amchas are set that they're set for chronic issues, yes, but I think overall, like in a year or two, I'm not sure how much we're going to be talking about the student protest issue. Um, but the thing is, again, Mercury is debilitated again. So I was like, well, how many times like has Mercury been debilitated? And then I looked up the Shadbala score. So Shadbala is like a formula for determining planetary strength overall throughout the chart, like both amshas and natal chart and that sort of thing. And it takes in various factors. So what shocked me, and I guess I shouldn't be shocked at this point, was Mercury Shadbala score of 90, and Jupiter had a Shadbala score of 80. And those are very, very low scores, meaning that both Mercury and Jupiter by the Shadbala score are very, very weak. And we've been seeing over and over again Mercury's debilitated and Jupiter's combust and in negative houses and debilitated in negative houses and that sort of thing. So, and Mercury and Jupiter are the two planets representing education, speech, communication. And you can see that's what's like just getting, pummeled here on various levels, whatever level you want to look at. Um, so we're seeing more of that here. Yeah, so let me see. In this Amsha, Jupiter Swan, the 11th. Well, that's positive. Jupiter's in its own house in its own sign in the 11th house, which is good. But again, Jupiter's combust, so there might not be there's good intentions, I think, here, but it's gonna, how do I say, it's like there's no tangible viewing of this goodness that's you know um, potentially coming to the 11th house here. Also income, that sort of thing. And it is supporting Venus, and it is supporting Saturn, and it is supporting Mercury. Um, because Mercury's in the sign of Jupiter, and Jupiter's aspecting Saturn and Venus. So again, there's some small seed. It's not seen here. Like in the natal chart of hope, of long-term group healing, of families, children, and relationships. But again, we're not seeing it yet because Jupiter's combust. So, and Venus is also combust. Mercury's debilitated twice over. So, and look, Saturn is in a sign of Mercury, which is debilitated. And Mercury's in a sign of Jupiter, which is combust. So again, it's like, it's like the sinkhole. Like it's almost like in the movies when like somebody's in this like sinkhole or sliding, through sand off of a cliff or something like that, and they're trying to grab, and it's just like sinking, sinking, sinking. It's just, yeah, there's no solid ground here. So, what else? You could also see here like this restriction of student speech because Saturn is aspecting Mercury. So all these policies to, essentially that out. Where's the line there? What else? There's a parivartana. Oh, there's a couple of parivartanas, I think, right? Oh, there's a Venus Sun parivartana. So again, we're getting this parivartana between administration and the seventh house of relationships. But you've got Mars and Sun there, two fire planets in the ninth spot of leadership. So a lot of anger, angry administration, and the dispositor for the ninth house is Venus, but it's combust, so no compassion, also no real strong standing here. So there's an attempt to salvage relationships, but I think that attempt is mostly from I think financial basis, because the thing is like the finances, like even though Jupiter's combust here, Jupiter being in its own sign, well, it is combust, but like what I think. Um, The stronger possibility here is to salvage the tangible things like finances and income versus relationships. I think some of these relationships are just complete toast. Like you have also, Saturn also on this Venus and the seventh house of relationships. So that's going to be, long-term burns here. That's what we're seeing with Saturn being a long-term planet and being in Purva Bhadrapada again, a funeral pyre. So some of these relationships are, good, done for good. And I can also see here again this, angry administration, like cutting, like the federal judges, like I mentioned, restricting internships for graduates and stuff like that because they don't agree with what students have done. But again, there's not, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to restrict, law students who haven't even started law school yet. I mean, what do they have to do with this? I mean, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But anyway, then the bombshell here at D27, Jupiter's not well placed. So again, voice, justice, fairness, compassion, um, is challenged here. We have Saturn on it again. Venus is in the ninth house again, but it's combust, even though it's Swa. Not a lot of outward compassion shown by administration. Mercury in the fifth house of public stage, but Saturn's on it. So again, even though Saturn is or Saturn is not on it, but there's a parivartana. Oh, this is the amsa that had two parivartanas. So there's a parivartana between Jupiter and Sun, and there's a parivartana exchange of houses between Saturn and Mercury. Um, So Sun, Mercury, and Saturn you can see, but the thing is, again, Saturn and Mercury are separatist planets, and it's very like kind of calculated cold type energy typically, like a very rational approach, but not softness or kindness necessarily. And then you have a Sun, so Sun administration is going to be all over this chart, and justice and law is all over this chart. So um, there will be losses here for sure. Yeah, Mercury and Venus again in 5-9 houses, student council versus administration. I would say there's really no real grace or leniency given by the administration. They just want this to be over with and clean things up, especially because there's this time pressure with, graduation set up and stuff like that. Um, Saturn's on Jupiter and on the seventh house, so again, ending of relationships. Because Jupiter is also the owner, ruler of the seventh house of relationships. So, what else? Yeah, I would say actually, because Saturn is on Jupiter and Saturn is on Mercury, the two planets, again, they're already weak planets, as I mentioned several times over. And then you have this massive Saturn on them. It's like, you're really squashing. Suppressing voice here of various groups and societies. Again, not just, I keep talking about the student protests because I think it's the most, I think, obvious example. Um, but yeah, that's, it's just this very strong attempt to just squash voices, really. Here, yeah, we have Mars again in the second house. So ending oral communication. Else? No, that's again, it's all pretty much the same stuff. So there is strength and resilience here, but I mean, there's still a strong fight going on. So it's not like there's again any softness coming from this. It's just but there is resilience. So we'll focus on that, I guess. Then we have here the two kind of spirituality worship charts, the Panchamsha D5 for innate spirituality and the Vimshamsha D20, the formal worship, kind of more formal religion type charts. So first of all, please notice that both of these are dual signs, dual lugna charts here. So without even looking at any planets anywhere, there's already weakness in these charts, as I mentioned, because Jupiter's owns two of the Kendra, the four houses in the middle. Jupiter's combustion owns or rules two of these houses, and in the main chart, natal chart, Mercury is debilitated and owns the other two. So just with that alone, the planets are going to be challenged and weak. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, so in the D5, K2 is not well placed, which again is the shortest Dasha sub period here. So it's a blip, but it's still the 12th house. Then we have a parivartana exchange of houses between Jupiter and Mercury. So a lot of again education. They're in parivartana, great. That brings some strength, great. But again, these are the two weakest planets by Shadbala. Jupiter combust, Mercury's debilitated, not only in the natal chart but here. So how much strength is this going to bring? Who knows? Also, Jupiter and Mercury are education, speech, and media planets. You can see Saturn is on Mercury, Mars is on Mercury again. So cutting the cord, um, literally. So even though I think like if this was a person's chart, they might be really into learning or reading or speaking about uh, spirituality. That's part of their spirituality is like more of a jnana path. Like if you're into yoga, there are four different paths to sort of the top of the mountain from a yoga perspective, and one of them is a jnana path. So like what did I say? Path of knowledge. So a lot of, especially Buddhist type religions, or they incorporate a lot of mental, like meditations and stuff like that, or study of sacred texts. Those are considered paths of knowledge, jnana yoga paths, and I could see that being here. Um, but again, you're going to have a lot of challenge here. So even if this is kind of um, your thing or somebody's thing, uh, it's going to be hard to do. So it's going to be hard to study. It's going to be hard to get news. It's going to be hard to focus on, kind of spiritual religious studies here, even if that's kind of natural tendencies. There's going to be ending of relationships, um, difficulty with teachers. There is this again, it's seeking of truth, seeking of justice here. Some attempt again with improving relationships, but to what degree? Again, at this moment in time, I think it's going to be pretty tough. Mm. The other thing is that that's another reason why this chart is pretty weak is that all these planets like Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Mercury, and Venus, they're all on these, they're all on planets, signs ruled by Jupiter, which is combust, and Mercury, which is debilitated. So they don't really have, if they were in other signs, like maybe the second house because it's positive. Well, but you see, that's the thing is there's like So like the second house is a positive sign, but it's ruled by Venus. So you're going to go to another house that's combust, with a combust lord. And then the ninth house has a combust lord because it's Venus again. So again, there's like no solid ground here. Um, it's going to be very difficult, I think, to maintain or practice your own practice of spirituality, whatever form that takes, and have faith in it, I think. And again, for somebody like this, they might be somebody who practices other things that are very speech and education based, like mantras and studying Shastra, classical texts, and stuff like that. Um, Saturn and Mars on Mercury again, suppression of erratic speech. Mars, again, the soul enemy of Mercury. So we're seeing that several times over. And then finally, the Vim Shamsha here, D20 for formal worship. So it's a Virgotama Lugna, so strong, important chart here. Venus and Mercury are not well placed, so you can see that, when we switch planetary periods in July, this chart might actually see more difficulty than what it's currently experiencing. And Venus is already in a negative sign here. There's a parivartana between Saturn and Jupiter. Jupiter is again, a positive sign, but it's debilitated. So, and you can see the Saturn on it. So I think this is suppression of religious speech or spiritual speech. Again, because things might be getting worse. There might be, again, suppression of outward expression of religious faith, because it's just too inflammatory, even if it's, which might seem unfair. People are it might be that people are so riled up, they're just like, everybody just be quiet, just calm down, because people aren't even listening to each other anymore. They're just going off, it looks like. But you can see also, because of this, even though Jupiter and Saturn are going to be all over the chart, Jupiter is something you can't see because it's combust, but Saturn is. So that massive Saturn, remember from the natal chart in Aquarius, in Purva Bhadrapada, that's a lot of endings and release and combustion. And you can also see here, Saturn's on everything. Saturn's on Mars, Saturn's on Rahu Ketu. When it do the exchange with Jupiter, it's going to be on Sun and Moon. Jupiter, Mercury, and Venus are all in signs of Saturn. This is a really tough D20, even though, again, it looks like initially, um, there's some good going on here, but I think formal worship places probably are going to have a tougher time moving forward, just because, people are just on edge and not thinking straight, clearly, and making good decisions. So, I could see here shutting down or loss of formal venues, because again, you have, what is it? Saturn on the Lugna, Saturn on everything here. Rahu, Saturn, Mars in the 10th house. So daily activity shut down with formal worship. What is that? What do I have here? D9. Oh, the other thing is like the D9, the ninth lord is Sun here, and Sun is gone 12 away. So there's a loss through administration here. So it might be, again, one of the ways that administration is shutting things down is through just saying, like if there's chapels or mosques or synagogues on campus or something like that, like they're shutting it down because, again, it's just people are just, off the rails right now. Um, Jupiter debilitated in the second house, aspected by Saturn and Purva. So this is, again, loss of voice and speech and justice here, is what I'm saying. So yeah, tough moments, people, for sure. But if you've been counting, so I went through 14 amshas, and 7 of them are dual lugnas, which again, they're the 4 Kendras, 4 houses in the middle, which represent core energy, are the 2 weakest planets by Shadbala, and also Jupiter's combust and Mercury's debilitated in the natal chart. So even on deep levels, we're not seeing a lot of support here. And then six of the other, out of 14, six of the other amshas are ruled by Saturn. So, and we've been talking about how massively strong Saturn is. So we've either get charts that are really like iron fisted or just completely shaky. And then the other one, so seven are dual, six are ruled by Saturn. The other one that's left over is ruled by Mars, which you've been talking about how, you know, um, massively influential Mars has been on Mercury in terms of cutting, speech and, disrupting student life and stuff like that. So, this is pretty deep, unfortunately. All right. And again, it looks like in a lot of ways, for most of these charts, though, if there is a silver lining here, it looks for most of these charts, once we move to Venus, Mercury, at the end of July, Venus will be out of combustion, Jupiter will be out of combustion, and then Mercury will have moved on out of the grips of Mars, and will be on more solid ground, at least in the natal chart. Most of these charts are showing that should be an improvement, except again, the D20, I'm not sure about that one. All right, so again, tough times, everybody. And the other thing with, Jupiter and Venus and Moon being combust and Mercury being debilitated, I think that also, with all this outward skirmish and challenge and fighting going on, I think the other thing, the other kind of message from all of this is that you've really got to focus on finding the light within because so much is being challenged on the outside external world right now. So, in whatever way you can do that, I would do that. All right. So, okay. So, as always, thanks for stopping by and listening to one of my talks. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concept playlist. They can all be found there. And then if you're looking for other birth charts that I've analyzed from famous people, places, and moments in time, you can check out my birth charts archive list 2024 video where I have a list of the different charts that I've analyzed and the video you can find them in. Also, I do offer individual birth chart readings live on Zoom and as a recorded video. If you're interested in that, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info on that. And then I do have another YouTube channel, Natural Medicine, which includes other Vedic arts such as Ayurveda and yoga, and other paradigms of natural medicine such as homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there as well. So, as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you navigate the energy cycles of your own life. And even though, again, in this moment in time, there's a lot of challenge. It's also important to know that, again, all these things move in cycles. So Jupiter will come back online, in a few weeks. Venus will come back online. Mercury's moving out of debilitation in a few days. So, hold tight, go deep within to find the oasis because right now it's I think more difficult to find outwardly. But I hope again all this talk and information was helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So until the next one, take care. Namaste.